Now a classified cable from the U.S. Embassy has revealed there was intelligence that Afghanistan could quickly cave to the Taliban, despite the president's protests to the contrary. The international community is also turning its outrage on Biden, with one European leader calling his blunder, quote, the greatest debacle in the history of NATO. Here's Jennifer Wishon with more.
As many as 15,000 Americans and tens of thousands more Afghans who helped the U.S. military remain on the ground in Afghanistan, desperate to escape the Taliban. U.S. troops have restored some order inside the airport, but outside, panic continues. Reports that at least 12 people have been killed this week due to gunfire or stampede as the Taliban blocks people, even some Americans with passports, from getting through checkpoints. President Biden says no matter when U.S. troops withdrew, chaos was sure to follow.
Getting out would be messy no matter when it occurred.
But a classified cable from the U.S. Embassy in Kabul to Secretary Blinken July 13th warned of the Taliban's swift gains and the collapse of the Afghan military and called for speeding up evacuations. Now the president faces criticism from America's NATO allies. This is the greatest debacle that NATO has seen since its foundation, and it is an epochal change we are facing, said Armin Laschet, who's expected to become the next German chancellor. In Britain, members of parliament united to hold President Biden in contempt, accusing him of throwing the UK and everybody else into the fire, in a move they fear will embolden Russia and China.
Like many veterans, this last week has been one that has seen me struggle through anger and grief and rage, the feeling of abandonment of not just a country, but the sacrifice that my friends made.
And now America's European allies are looking inward. Frustrated with Biden's unilateral move, they say damaged and humiliated NATO.
We can set out a vision, clearly articulated, for reinvigorating our European NATO partners, to make sure that we are not dependent on a single ally, on the decision of a single leader.
And this afternoon, President Biden is set to update Americans on evacuation efforts. Jennifer Wishon, CBN News.
And Pat, the president has pledged to keep U.S. troops on the ground in Afghanistan until every single American is evacuated.
Jennifer, there are reports of Afghans rising up in protest to the Taliban. Can you tell me what's happening on the ground?
Sure. You know, ironically, Pat, yesterday was Afghanistan Independence Day. And so you saw pockets of Afghans waving their flag and protesting this takeover by the Taliban. They say the Taliban does not represent them. They, unfortunately, were quickly dispersed with gun-wielding members of the Taliban. And this is where we are. We have the Afghan people, in a matter of days, have gone from freedom to living in fear. We know that women who have enjoyed freedom, who have been going to school, who have been holding jobs, are now burning evidence of all of that. We have reports of women who say that young girls, they and their friends are prepared to kill themselves if the Taliban comes to their doors and tries to take them away, because they think death would be much better than anything they could experience at the hands of the Taliban. Men also burning any evidence that they worked alongside the U.S. And here's the problem. You know, yesterday the president made it sound like the Taliban was giving safe passage to Americans and their allies. That is not the case. The Taliban is manning these checkpoints as people try to go to the airport. They're manning them with guns. And so you have Americans who are having a hard time getting through, even if they have an American passport. You have America's allies who need to get to the airport, but they're afraid to show the Taliban evidence that they worked with the U.S. And so it's just a debacle. It's going to take a miracle to get all the Americans and all of the allies out in a timely manner. And Pat, I can't help but think it sure would be helpful if America still had control of Bagram Air Base.
Jennifer, this president really is clueless. You know, he got on the air, was being interviewed, and said, there's nothing. How could I have made any difference? I couldn't see it. He doesn't know anything, and we have a nation that is without leadership. Did you have anything in the polls? They're really starting to turn the American people to turn against him, aren't they?
Absolutely, Pat. This has been a total disaster for this president, and we now have the numbers to show it. You look at the president's approval rating on Friday, August 13th. That was the Friday a week ago before Afghanistan fell to the Taliban. On that day, he was enjoying a 53% approval rating. Fast forward to Monday, August 16th, this past Monday, his approval rating dropped to 46%. That is a 7% drop in just a matter of days. And as you said, Pat, this president is tone deaf about the situation, and he only continues to double and triple down on these decisions that he's made. You know, I think anyone who lived through 9/11, anyone who lived through the beginning of the Afghan war, you look at my generation, I know people who fought in the war. I know people who are still living with injuries from the war. I know people who died in the war. You have parents who lost children. You have Americans in just a matter of weeks will commemorate 20 years since the attacks of 9/11, 2001. And once again, the Taliban is in control in Afghanistan. I think Americans are outraged at what they're seeing, the desperation of the Afghan people after so many, we're proud of seeing Afghans get to vote for the first time. It truly is just a terrible situation for this country, certainly for the Afghan people and for this president. And, his agenda is certainly dead on arrival. This is going to be with him for many weeks and months.
Or anybody resigning? I mean, the Secretary of State is a loser. The Chairman of the Joint Chiefs is a loser. The Secretary of Defense, I mean, he's got a group of incompetents surrounding him, and he himself, apparently this nation is leaderless. Is anybody resigning on account of all these things?
Well, pressure is beginning to grow there. The president, is standing by his decision, and he says that his military advisors did not advise him to keep a small number of troops there, that everyone was on board here. But you have to wonder, Pat, about the intelligence. We've been there for 20 years. Didn't we know? Didn't we see how quickly the Taliban was moving? Didn't someone read that cable from our embassy employees, more than 20 Americans working in the embassy, who said, hey, the Taliban is taking over here. The Afghan army is not holding. We've got to act fast to get Americans and our allies out of here. Somebody was asleep at the switch. And so if the president isn't willing to take the blame, then you have to wonder if heads are going to begin to roll in terms of people getting fired.
Jennifer, thank you very much. And ladies and gentlemen, I tell you what, it's up to the Lord to do something, but we have the greatest nation on earth, and it is leaderless. The president and vice president are both incompetent, and they have done terrible things. Every decision he's making is bad. We're having rampant inflation. We have the southern border being overrun with people, thousands of them coming in. We're busing those people unvaccinated throughout America, and you've got this problem with job availability of workers, because the president continues to give these government payments so people get more money from not working. It's a chaotic situation, and every single thing that's going on, our nation is without a leader. And it's time that American people do something. If nothing else, ask the Lord for a change wherever, because this is the greatest nation on earth, and we are floundering because of bad leadership.